Hello and welcome to another edition of Thoughts on Talks. I can't tell if you're really frozen, Rev, or if it's just a computer glitch. You fooled me. Oh, and my microphone is like halfway across the room. Let me bring it a little closer to me.
Oh, you sound good that way.
It's shiny, isn't it?
It's big too. That's
It
not
is.
like your little portable media.
Yeah, this is a podcast mic, but it looks bigger because it's closer to the screen. It looks kind of like...
That's the way I take pictures of the fish I catch.
To me, it looks like R2-D2,
Yeah.
but a kind of steampunky version. But he's got about to take off, so he's rocket ship R2-D2. There you go. Now you can't see it anymore. It's invisible.
That sounds great.
Oh, thank
Don't you think the Rev should finally get around to buying one, folks?
I might just take care of that for you. And have it sent, one to the house, one to the church.
They can add on the comments, right? Yes, for crying out loud, buy a microphone, you cheapskate.
Yeah, you can make donations directly to the Reverend Mike Microphone Fund for podcasting. Uh-oh, he's gone away now. I could have paused, I suppose, but
I forgot to mute myself. You probably heard all that. Sorry.
Oh my gosh. Mute. This is part of the Zoom etiquette world. You know, you have to be aware of the noises you may be making that can annoy your fellow Zoomers.
Yes, lo siento.
Well, thank you. No, that you at least scooted away, so you were away from the mic. So I have our little Black Lives Matter logo up in the corner because we do believe that Black Lives Matter. Okay, I don't know what you're doing with your collar. I can also put on our Thoughts on Talks thought bubble.
Well, let's leave our Black Lives Matter because they do.
Still matters.
Yeah.
So when we're not talking with Salam about Black Lives Matter, we're talking amongst ourselves about Reverend Mike's Sunday Talk, which, you know, sometimes gets lost in the wider conversation that we have with Salam, even though we bring it back at some point to, you know, consciousness, spirit, all those things. But so today we will talk about...
It gives us about a half dozen really interesting things to consider, I must say.
Oh my gosh, I do research after talking to Salam every week.
Yeah.
I'm grateful to know about it, to look it up, you know, because otherwise with the way social media is, these things don't pop up in your feed unless you've already searched it. So, but your talk yesterday, which was November 15th,
correct,
was
how engaged is God as us?
As us? Or
as us.
I thought it said in us.
It probably did, but it was supposed to say as us.
Interesting. So I like that idea because most traditional thought about God is looking outward, for an outward God to do things for us. But we rarely think about the other direction of how the Spirit engages in us. And of course, we're in New Thought actually placing God within us as well as all around us.
Well, we're realizing God in us.
That's good. Yes.
That it's already there.
Right.
So I heard years back, before I knew anything about New Thought, in 12-step, where they said that God hid in the one place people would never think to look for it.
Right in here.
In our own hearts. Yeah.
Yes. Very clever.
So.
Yeah. And so I do remember you used a Bible verse and then said, if you're somebody who likes to beat people over the head with the Old Testament, that's a good one to use. That cracked me up.
Well, yeah, Ezekiel 7:2-7. The king shall mourn, and the prince shall be clothed with desolation, and the hands of the people of the land shall be troubled. I will do unto them after their way, according to their deserts. I will judge them, and they shall know that I am the Lord.
That's hardcore.
That's 2,600 years ago. But you can easily imagine that being plugged into today. And, you know, where we are at in our own country, either side could, as I said, either side could use that.
Right.
Because the Old Testament was really good about judging behavior, perhaps particularly the behavior of women. They was very focused on adulterous women. And so
I don't think you should say that about the Old Testament. It's not mostly about that. I mean, there's laws about how to keep your grain.
The prophets would come in with varying, like one would be very forgiving, then the other one would be, and they would use it as metaphor also.
Right. Yeah.
So anyway.
And for people who aren't that familiar with the Bible, the Old Testament is more of the Judaic.
Yeah, actually be more accurate, and I usually remember to say this, the Hebrew Bible.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the New Testament is about Jesus and onward.
Right.
So
although there are books in the Christian Old Testament that are not in the Torah. So,
right.
Yeah.
It's just the first 5 books of our Bible that most Christians know that are Torah, right?
I think they have a couple more prophets also.
Okay.
In the Old Testament.
Right. So for people who don't differentiate and they hear Bible quotes and they you know, and it's always out of context when somebody just takes a quote. You don't know necessarily the story it's from or the, you know, the whole context historically. It can seem like really harsh and judgy. And like you said, a lot of the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible is setting those laws, setting those parameters, the structure for the Hebrew people, the Israelites, to live and thrive. And they had a lot of good reasons when you look at them in historical context that for many modern people might not translate.
Well, and many ancient peoples and really not up until not too that long ago believed that God would use, let's say, the character defects of men. He would just allow them to run loose on each other just to kind of teach folks a lessons. So, for instance, Nebuchadnezzar, you know, comes in, conquers the nation of Israel and Judea. I don't know if they were 2 kingdoms then or not. I forget. But anyway, he destroys the temple and then took a bunch back as slaves to Babylon. And up until then, the only place where God was believed to reside was in the temple itself. Well, now they had to develop a whole new theology, you know, within this as captives in the Babylon Empire. But even then, you know, another guy comes in. I want to say Xerxes, but I don't think that's right. It's an Assyrian monarch. Oh gosh, it's right on the tip of the tongue.
I'm going to try to Google it based on Nebuchadnezzar, but there's a lot of letters there.
It might be Cyrus. Look up Cyrus.
Okay.
Anyway, he
Persian conqueror Cyrus the Great.
yeah, I think he allowed them to return back to Israel. And then one of those guys, I don't remember which one, actually helped them to rebuild the temple and to rebuild the walls because he needed the fortification for his own as a using Israel. It's no different than today to use Israel as a vassal state to keep the Egyptians in check, right?
Yeah,
So,
I mean, that's one of the things that you learn when you do look at the Bible and look at the history and the context and look at a map and piece it all together. It's like the story of humanity, at least a piece of it. It's a long continuing history of one group of people. And
well, and Persians, they had this, on again, off again relationship with the Hebrews. And so it is interesting to think about how, they haven't always been adversaries, right? So hopefully you can't hear that ringer.
I hear it a little, but
Okay.
that just means you're very popular. That's one of our callers, but we're busy.
Yeah.
So that particular quote sounds all judgy and harsh. And what was it? Dressed in desolation or something?
Yeah.
That doesn't sound fun. So how do you?
Well, because they were being, the population was being obstinate.
Okay.
And, well, there's a whole thing about it, but basically they weren't following the rules. And so Ezekiel was calling them out for it.
Okay.
And even the prophetic tradition itself is a very interesting thing, at least for ministers to read, because, or rabbis, I suppose, because, there's this calling, right? There's this calling, and then there is usually this resistant personality.
Yeah.
So
it's also in the hero's journey. Joseph Campbell saw that throughout all hero myths, that there is some kind of calling and then there's a resistance to the calling. But what has been seen and felt cannot be unseen and unfelt. And eventually the hero is sort of pulled into whatever the adventure is.
Yeah. So Reverend Dr. William Barber, of course, has taken this prophetic tradition along with, I would say, before him, the fellow that we were studying last year, whose name escapes me.
Last year, Joel Goldsmith.
No, the 12 prophetic 12 principles of the prophetic God, justice or something.
Yes, I have a picture in my head.
Not Howard Thurman.
It wasn't him?
No.
I thought it was.
But he also would have probably spoke to such things. But the idea is to take up the for modern people to take up this prophetic charge, right? To prophecy or to make claim to the world for the Spirit, right? And that in this way we must become the hands and the feet and the way that God operates in the world.
So it's stepping into our authority to hear Spirit speaking to us and acting through us to allow ourselves to follow what inspiration we get and act in the world.
Right. So what he was trying to do, and he's been speaking to this for some time, William Barber, that not saying anything is no longer an option, and he's been speaking to Christian communities in the South. I believe he's out of North Carolina. So if you can no longer see the abuse of human beings for whatever reason and not say something. That the prophetic call demands that we say something. And then he asked the question then, how will the haters learn that they're doing wrong until they learn of God's love? And so this is what we are called to profess.
And it struck me when you said the word haters, because I think of that as a modern colloquial term.
Yeah.
And so when I heard that, I thought, oh, is this guy like, a hip hop prophet? Is he
well,
kind of guy?
He's younger than I am, so he probably knows a little hip hop.
All right.
he reminds me of my buddy Dwayne.
Okay.
I never got a chance to hear Dwayne speak, but he would have really, and he must have known about this guy. He certainly knew about Howard Thurman. So
okay.
Anyway, so I was speaking to, this idea of, because what I take out of that passage from Ezekiel is the naked use or even display of power, of hubris, of arrogance, right? And of course, we can all be guilty of that within our own lives.
Yeah.
So this is one of the things that, this is one of the disadvantages of believing that God is up there, and this belief that we have to petition God in order to, manipulate God in some, or bargain with, right? To try and cut a deal, like with the prosecuting attorney, right? So, I mean, I'm speaking from experience. You're laughing because you probably can't relate to that.
Well, I like the idea of the prosecuting attorney because it fits, especially when we're talking about a judging Old Testament kind of God. But also, the idea has been occurring to me that the world that we create is based on our understanding of it's how we create, and now I'm lost in my own thought, but we've created this system of law because that's how we think the world works. And so we've created a prosecutorial system because we believe in that kind of justice. And we've created the internet because we believe that this is how connection happens and this is how all of these things happen. So
and then it becomes a reflection of our own mind.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
That's what I was going for. Thank you.
Yeah, so I just had this thought while you were saying that. So do we have a spiritual belief that we live in a cosmic meritocracy? Right? That, in other words, everything is transactional in some way.
Right.
Which is that's not really what Scripture teaches, although in passages like the one that I read, it's like God is like the overindulgent parent who has to tell their kids 10 times to knock it off, and then and there's no 1 through, it just goes from peaceful abiding to the nuclear option, right?
It just skips over, don't make me pull over this car. It goes right to the punishment.
Exactly. You don't get the hand behind right, while he's trying to drive. You get the pull it over, take off the belt.
Well, and that's also how our human interpretation of parenthood, of like Jesus is trying to talk about a relationship that is close and loving and caring, and he uses father, but not everybody's experience of a father is close and loving and caring and teaching and guiding.
Well, yeah, and the world was such a tough place. I think in Roman law, I think this is right. I think you could kill one of your kids without being, maybe you had to be a noble. I think the nobility probably got away with a lot.
Probably, and the value on human life was different in that time, in that world.
Yeah. So it is. I mean, I often speak to the genius of Christian thought, of Jesus. But the other part of it is that this emerged during the time of the Romans, right? In a place where the people who were living, it must have been a pretty subsistence life anyway, right? And then you got to do it all under the boot of the Romans.
Yeah.
So, and then here comes this guy, turn the other cheek. I can just, I can just see Barabbas going, are you freaking kidding me, bro?
It is pretty radical.
Yeah.
To think about these things. So when we think about how does spirit engage as us, we look at what are our choices, and are we actually aligning with spirit within us,
right?
Or are we shutting it off?
And is a hardline conservative judge, let's say, in the legal system, right? Maybe he thinks he's working at God as me.
Yeah.
It's going to kick your ass right now. Right?
Yeah, true. I mean, and that's sometimes.
Of course, having said that, by the time you get to being sentenced for anything in the modern era, at least as a white guy.
Okay. Are you speaking from experience?
You got to actually, you got to really kind of screw up pretty consistently. At least in California. When I'm talking about before you do, hard time. Like prison. Jail time is jail time. It's, it's not fun, but it's not prison.
Okay. This is important information.
This is what I understand.
Okay. Very good.
Yeah. I myself know nothing of such things.
Because you have a halo over your head.
No, I'm just blessed. It pays to be blessed and lucky. Yeah.
So I remember there was like, you had made this point in the talk, and then you ended with the meta prayer again. May all beings be safe. So how did you connect this to that? Do you remember?
Did I say that?
I think you did.
Oh, well, that was an in the moment thing, I guess.
Okay. Or maybe in my own head.
Or maybe you felt like I should do that.
I don't know.
But I do. I mean, we actually have we have artwork at home that has the meta prayer in it, and and that comes out of Buddhism, of course. And we don't really, in the Judeo-Christian tradition, we have to be pretty soft-hearted to get there.
Yeah. I'm thinking like St. Francis, the prayer of St. Francis, that might be the closest Christian.
Yeah, but look how many, it's not like they're lined up around the block, the Francises.
Right.
I mean, they're kind of the exception.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, Ignatius was kind of a hard ass.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, I shouldn't say a hard ass, but yeah, I mean, just super disciplined.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas St. Francis was, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love.
Right.
Where there is injury, pardon. So how do we...
And the patron saint of animals, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So, he was known to be tender-hearted, but that doesn't necessarily mean he was a pushover either.
Right. Yeah.
I think this is where I was talking about this with one of my minister colleagues, trying to work this, this tension of masculinity. Right. In fact, we even we touched on it a little bit, but we didn't talk about it in those terms with Salam last week when he was sharing with us another viewpoint of the Van Jones, emotional sharing, shall we say?
Yeah.
So, but I think men are getting better at it, but I don't know if we're getting better. I don't know that we don't still feel like we're weak when we get, like, philosophically, I can say, yeah, I need to be softer. Like, I can do that up here.
Right.
Right. And then I'm driving, I'm in my car.
By yourself where nobody can hear you, not myself. Being softer.
Yeah, exactly. I'm taking this one's inventory and the way this one's driving, and that one cut me off. And I'm having a little rant, sometimes out loud. Thank God for Bluetooth, because now it looks like, I might be on the
phone. Right. You're not just a crazy person talking to yourself anymore.
Right. And then I'll get done with my little rant, and then I'll go, I wonder if I need to go get some help.
Maybe talk to somebody.
I think maybe it's time.
Well, I had a thought somewhere back a little ways before we went off on that tangent, about if somebody who's like a hardline judge, or anybody who's doing what they believe is God's work in the world, that they are directed by Spirit to do this work. But from our perspective, that work does not look like good work or loving work. How do we find the space to be able to talk to that person and say, can we get you to step back from that position? Can we get you to question it? I mean, it's very hard once people are invested to the point where their heart-minded spirit is in on this belief that they're following up, and it's for the protection of their family, or they believe that this is what God wants from them to protect, this narrow path or narrow group of people, and they're right and everybody else is wrong. So that's where I think the difficulty is in America that somebody who to me looks like they're not behaving from a loving or even spiritual or religious place can rally support from churchgoers or religious people that doesn't look like love to me. You know what I'm saying? So,
well,
how do we have conversations when that's involved?
Somehow,
Yeah.
Somehow we have to shift the conversation to where
some common human ground.
yes. So where to be. Okay, well, let's just take it this way, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So it's according to the Pew Research study on religion,
Mm-hmm.
close to 70% of Americans believe in the Judeo-Christian ethic.
Okay.
So if this is so,
Mm-hmm.
then why doesn't the world look like that? Why doesn't the world look like turn the other cheek?
Yeah.
Instead, what's become popularized is harsh talk, the bully boy. So, I mean, not naming names, but I've always felt that this personality that's been driving the national conversation for the last 5 years was like that boastful know-it-all down at the end of the bar shooting his mouth off. And every bar has one. Every bar has one.
Okay.
And as the night goes on, they get even more obnoxious. And they get more emboldened as people don't say anything. And I've always kind of felt that that was the personality, but because so many of us, so many of us have that guy in us, right? And so in our frustration, I think there was a part of us that likes a guy who's like, sticking it to the libs, right? And the libs are like, the guy who's getting sand kicked in his face. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
We have this weird dynamic going on in the conversation. Instead of, that experience, let's take masculinity on for a second.
Okay.
That to be soft-hearted is masculine.
Right.
Right. Is a sign of confidence. Is a sign of power.
And inner strength.
Because it actually is. It takes far more work to control yourself in that way than to let the beast out and rage around and give in to your testosterone.
Right.
And, when I was in high school, my high school quarterback was a great athlete. He played on the Miami Dolphins, in fact.
Oh, wow.
And went and played in the Super Bowl in LA, lost to Theismann and the Redskins, but he made it there.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing.
But, and so you would, a guy like that, it would have been easy for him, to just go around and tag everybody and, but he didn't need to do that because, he knew he was good. And he knew, he proved it out on the field or on the court. So it's that kind of, and I have to say, it's usually the little insecure guys, like I was. Those are the ones who are always chirping, shooting their mouth off. So, because I think that if our men can learn to be learn that soft-heartedness and confidence and self-control are signs of power and masculinity,
Mm-hmm.
I got to tell you, I think the rest would fall into place, because I just kind of feel like men kind of, the Billy Joel song, we didn't start the fire. Well,
Mm-hmm.
right. In this case, I think a lot of times we do. And
Yeah.
it's that
I see what you're
toxic thing. Which is
Well, and yeah, if men in power were willing to be softer and listen instead of trying to control, then there would be more room for women, for anybody who hasn't been represented in jobs, in media, and wherever. There'd be room for everybody.
right. Right. So long as, as long as the margins aren't too harsh. Right. In other words, thanks, old man. Now it's my time. Because I do kind of feel a little bit of that.
Yeah.
As I'm aging. Yeah. But,
Hmm.
that's, but so I have, that's the grist in my mill.
Right. And
Right?
isn't that every something that happens in every generation? Like if I watch a movie from the 50s, they treat older people that same way.
I know. Well, I
At
mean,
least in our culture.
retirement age, I mean, I remember when I was a kid,
Yeah.
right? And I would see, people who were 60, just, man, they looked old. I mean, Eisenhower looked like an old dude.
I remember a friend of mine telling me she was in an elevator and two young people, teenagers, maybe college students, got in the elevator with her. And the conversation they were having, one said to the other, "Oh my God, if I ever reach age 40, just kill me right now. So old." And my friend in the elevator, of course, had just turned 40.
Uh-huh.
So, and it seems ridiculous once you get to 40. It's like, well, I still feel like that teenager or that college student inside.
Well, I asked my grandmother that when she was in her 70s. How old do you feel inside? She said 17. Right. And she couldn't hear. And she'd lived through the Blitz in London.
Wow.
Right? I mean, a lot of hard, she worked in service to, wealthy Brits, an Irish woman worked in service to wealthy Brits around London area.
Wow.
So, but inside she's 17. But
Yeah.
I do want to circle back, though, because we asked the question. So, do we live in a cosmic meritocracy?
Or do we think we live? Do we put ourselves as if we live?
Well, because we're constructing this model that we live in on the earth plane.
Right.
But in God's world, it's a distribution problem, not an abundance problem. Right? I mean, there literally is enough wealth to go around, except, there's maybe 5,000 families that are controlling a gigantic chunk of it. Who could live very well. Right?
Yeah.
And and don't get me wrong, I'm not into collectivization or that kind of thing. I'm just making the observation that whether it's food or land or capital, the problem is not a supply. It's not on the supply side.
Right.
And because we do live in an abundant universe. Now, what we attempt to do in New Thought is to acknowledge that we do, in fact, live in an abundant universe that, as Jesus used to taught, that it is the Father's good pleasure to give us the keys to the kingdom. So even within the world of statistics, within this meritocracy that we have created, there is plenty of room for the outlier,
right,
to live in overflow.
So that brings up a couple of ideas for me, that like if we're already forgiven, we're already loved as we are, then are we the ones keeping us from accepting the abundance? And I think in many cases we are, because the mindset that we have says that we don't deserve that. So then we try to earn it. We try to, get the merit that we deserve this thing.
Or we create systems
right.
that make us feel okay. So for instance, we might create one system that says, well, you're wealthy because you are one of the elect. So you are one of God's chosen people. Otherwise, you wouldn't have wealth.
Right.
Well, that's fine, except with that wealth, then within that system also came a responsibility to help others. So that's kind of a loosely put together Calvinistic notion, right? Or that, through hard work, you are blessed. But see, there we're in the meritocracy thing again.
Right.
So if we are living in an abundant universe, and if we are to live as we are engaged with God as us, then it's up to us then to find ways to look after ourselves, look after our own for sure, but also to make it possible for others to access that. So this is why it's so important within the Black Lives Movement right now that it's not just it wasn't just a one-time thing where so many white allies took to the streets in support of recognition and respecting Black lives and the effect of systemic racism within our policing systems and within our society as well. But it also is imperative that we make sure that people of color have equal access to the system, because I don't think Black folk are looking for any special treatment except to make sure that they're not denied opportunity.
Yeah.
And I think if more folks understood that is what is that this is the challenge, maybe it might make it easier to get more to buy into it.
Right.
And because the truth is, as we create systems that demonstrate that Black Lives Matter and address the systemic components of that, my belief is that we're all going to prosper, all of us.
Yeah.
Right. So when the least among us are prospering, then we all prosper more.
Yeah.
We've actually saw that in this past administration as money started making its way to the last rung of the economic ladder, which fueled a whole bunch of economic activity. I don't know that anybody really thought about, any big, deep economic,
right.
Well,
it's reflected also.
Go ahead.
It's reflected also in places like with the microloans that are throughout Asia and Africa. They found that if they give a small loan to a woman to start her own home-based business, when a woman makes money and has control of the purse at home, she puts it into the home, the food, the children, and her neighborhood or her local businesses, and the whole area thrives. Whereas if the men control all the money, often it ends up they spend it at the bar or gambling, and they don't put as much into the home and all of that. So throughout these small villages in Africa and Asia, these microloans, and women have been shown to pay back their loans more quickly, more responsibly, and pay it off again and have a thriving small business. And so the microloan has shown this whole side of economics that hadn't been looked at before, that when you give people an opportunity, they rise to the challenge and everybody thrives. Whole communities thrive.
Well, and that's in the Bible as well, where it says, if it wasn't for women, we'd still be living in caves.
If it wasn't for women, nobody would have been here. You'd be rock people.
Right? That was between Genesis and Exodus.
Right, that's right. Right in there. I watched a part of a documentary series that I've been watching called Connected. It's on Netflix, and it's this adorable nerdy guy, Latif Nasser, and he travels around the world to connect things that seem insignificant or disparate, disconnected, and shows how the whole world, whether it's the ecosystem or thought, is connected, and you can find it in all these places. So one that I was watching last night, the first one was, or not the first one, I watched like two nights in a row. So the first one I watched over the last few days was about dust, how dust in the Sahara Desert is blown over the Atlantic, and it serves all these purposes in the ocean and changes our weather patterns, and then continues to blow into the Amazon, where it nourishes the Amazon rainforest from all of the nutrients that had been washed off by all the rain. So it really is this global cycle. The other one I saw was about a mathematical discovery, I guess you can call it. It's known as Benford's Law. And he traces it from like a little math book that he found from the 1800s, and sees how this pattern shows up. It's
this sounds familiar.
And you probably heard about it before. It's like governments use it to see if the curve looks authentic or if something's been tampered with. You can see it in music. If you take all of the classical musicians and put them as numbers into this thing, you get a perfect curve. And he was talking at the end of the show to these volcanologists, who are people who study volcanoes, not Vulcans from Star Trek.
Yeah.
That if you put data from all the volcanoes in the world into a set and check it against Benford's Law, it creates that perfect curve also. And so his question was, is this a pattern in us that we're seeing in the world outside of us? Or is it a pattern that exists in the universe that we are now noticing, that has always been there? And that it makes us feel good. We resonate better with things that follow this curve than things that don't. He's like, could you put Beyonce in there? Could you run all the Beyonce songs through and see if it matches the pattern? And one expert in Italy said, I bet it would work because it works with everything. So it made me think of divine order, that there is this order in the universe that we have to, we can remember it or not, it's still happening. And if we can work with that flow, again, taking us back to listening to our own inner guidance and our calling, we will have some ease in falling into our place on this curve, on this graph. And it's almost, it helps me like, okay, I can relax. I will end up where I'm meant to end up because there is order in the universe. There is law in motion that applies to everything. And so I'll just do what I'm called to do, and it'll all work out perfectly. What do you think about that?
That's really deep, man. No, I do remember seeing that, and I love it.
Yeah.
There does appear to be a law of life that is expressing.
Yes.
So Holmes came up with his version of this. Maybe it can be graphed. Who knows?
Oh.
When we engage with it in a conscious way, it can affect change for good, and our lives can get better. Sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, but always, at least by my experience, always better. So
it's almost like we have to allow spirit to engage as us, that it's always there at work, but we have to sort of get out of our own way, quit blocking our good, open ourselves up to the reality that this is, we are heirs to this kingdom that we are walking in, and we all have the same right to enjoy and engage and interact in this world and be part of its perfect order.
Well, and to trust it and get into it, and use it with a sense of gratitude and confidence at the same time.
Well, I think we've just solved all the world's problems right there.
Well, thank you. I'm going to go home and check my bank book now and see if
now that your consciousness is ready for it, I'm sure it's on its way if it's not there right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for anybody who's still with us and didn't see Reverend Mike's talk yesterday, you could check it out on the YouTube channel for CSL Granada Hills. There's also lots of episodes of Thoughts on Talks. I think this might be episode 44 that we're doing right now. Yeah. It's available as a podcast as well, although you'll miss out on looking at our lovely faces. You can listen to us as you're wandering about doing your good in the world. And that's pretty much everywhere podcasts are available. What else, Rev? There's a meditation Wednesday night that you could find. You can watch live from our YouTube channel.
Get something out of that.
Yeah.
And I also have a book.
That's right. You have a book.
Spirituality, Finding a God That Works, on Amazon. If you have Prime, it's only $10. $10 for enlightenment, man.
What a bargain. So lots going on.
I have to say, I've actually, I dip into it once in a while.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I'm kind of surprised how good it is.
Isn't that interesting that you put all this work and you've edited it and you've worked on it, and then you set it aside and move on and go back, and it's like, oh wow, that came out of my head. That was my expression. That's pretty good.
That's not bad. I think someone can get something out of that.
But it's not all us, of course. As authors, we're just channels. We're listening to our divine guidance and letting the voice speak through us, which is part of, I think, why I don't remember. Sometimes I read back something and I don't remember even thinking that. Yeah. But I wrote it down. So
yeah, well, that is the sweet spot, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I'm willing to give God the credit.
That's nice of you.
I don't have an issue with that.
He doesn't charge much.
I know who I'm dealing with.
Yeah, he doesn't charge much in royalties, so it's a good partnership.
Yeah, well, 10%, that's not so bad. I get 90.
There you go. I like it.
Yeah.
So, all right, that's Thoughts on Talks for this episode. We'll see you all next time.
And if you're watching, honey, happy birthday.
Is it Mrs. Rev's happy birthday today?
It is, yes.
Happy birthday, Steph.
Yeah.
Yay. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bionic.